Welcome to Her Upper Hand, a series exploring themes and journeys around female gambling harm.
Your brain works.
It's weird, isn't it?
I
was talking to Deb earlier on. I'm so different. I hated being different as a kid. I hated it.
You'll hear from 6 women, each affected in different but connected ways by gambling.
I started doing performance poetry. That was the one thing that gave me a bigger adrenaline rush than gambling ever did.
Over the course of 6 weeks, they've been learning about podcasting, and this series is the culmination of all that work.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Thank you all for sharing. Thank you very much for sharing.
In each episode, you'll hear one woman harness the power of audio to explore these themes in her own words.
This is Her Upper Hand.
Her Upper Hand. Real talk about women's experiences of gambling.
This is Kat.
A quick message for our listeners. In this series, you'll hear from women who have been affected by gambling, either personally or through people they care about. These episodes hold space for joy, resilience and hope, but we'll also talk openly about the emotional impact these experiences can have. Please take care while listening. You're welcome to pause, skip or return whenever it feels right. Hi, I'm Kat, and the theme of this episode is female gambling behaviour in connection with menstrual cycles. In the research of this really important, less spoken about topic, I've had to take myself back to a really pivotal period in my life. And that was the 6 weeks of residential rehab for gambling addiction that I spent with support charity Gordon Moody in the summer of 2022. Now, to give a bit of background as to how I ended up there, I'd been in gambling addiction recovery since September 2021 and had been going to regular GA meetings in Glasgow. By February 2022, I was still gambling, and I'd even made the fateful decision not to report my gambling at meetings, which felt like a kind of rock bottom in its own way. Around that time, I woke up one day and went into a kind of autopilot. I can't recall how I acquired the money, but somehow I'd been able to gather around £500 to go gambling with. Now, parts of this story are as clear as day, as if my soul doesn't want me to forget it, and other parts I'm so ashamed of that it's like a wholesale blur. But there I was in the Riverboat Casino, which is located on the Clyde at around 11 a.m. on a weekday morning with all this cash in hand, thinking I'm going to leave the building like a millionaire because today was the day that I was going to beat the roulette wheel. And that's part of the illness and insanity of gambling addiction. I'd never beaten any bookie or casino in any kind of way before, and God knows I had tried and tried again and again. But today was the day, and of course, it was never going to be the day. I learnt this the hard way, and within less than an hour, I'd walked out without a penny to my name and all the shame and regret that a person can handle. That night, through a flood of tears, I googled gambling rehab in Scotland or words to that effect, because I knew that GA wasn't going to be enough for me going forward, especially now that I'd reverted back further than I'd ever done in my gambling behaviour previously. I remember so well how the only option that came up for rehab treatment was the Priory, and that would have cost thousands. My heart sank, and I don't think I slept a wink that night for the pain that I was feeling. The next day, I googled again as if there was like a wee angel on my shoulder, and it was then that I found all about Gordon Moody's 6-week residential rehab for women. The only sticking point was that it was in Birmingham, and in a way Birmingham felt like the back end of the moon. But with my back against the wall, I made that phone call, and to cut this part of the story sideways, by the first week of May, I'd entered a 3-storey Victorian building in a busy residential area of this bustling city, 300 miles away from home, ready to start my recovery in earnest. Now, I could do a whole episode on my time in rehab, who I met, what I learnt, how it shaped my life forever in its way. But what I really want to focus on is menstrual patterns and the journey to discovery as it affected my gambling behaviour in stages of recovery. And the aim is to share this to help other women experiencing and questioning their own connection to this topic. So here I am, live, raking through boxes in my mum's house in East Kilbride, searching for answers. I'm looking to find a big ring binder that's full of my 6-week rehab materials, and specifically my 6 months after planner that might provide some evidence as to how my menstrual cycles and early recovery experience overlapped. So I have found the binder. It's sitting in front of me. It is about 8 inches thick, and it's crammed with titles such as surviving trauma, mental health and debt, unhelpful thinking habits and behavioural chains. It's stacked and it's packed. And I don't remember leaving college after 2 years with a binder as full as this, but I found this part that I'm specifically looking for. But more about this later. For the next 25 minutes, I would like you to hear Kiki's story as she makes her own connection between gambling addiction behaviour and menstrual patterns. Hiya Kiki, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode around female gambling addiction, harm and menstruation and hormones particularly. Can we start by sharing a little bit of your experience with your own gambling addiction?
Well, I started gambling around 16 years old with scratch cards, and that was kind of common theme throughout my 20s. So now, in hindsight, I can see that one of my friends, we used to have a drink and play hundreds and hundreds of pounds worth of scratch cards in a night. But because she was paying for them, I didn't recognise the problem within myself. And that went on for a good few years. I can say my gambling addiction came into play really in around 2016 after suffering a traumatic event with a miscarriage. And that's when I started playing slots online. And that was kind of the first time I'd experienced escapism through gambling. That's when it went from being fun, having a drink, doing the scratch cards, having a bit of downtime, me time, to then transitioning to emotional gambling, using it as a form of escapism. And that escalated so quickly for me in my behavioural changes happened so quickly with the lying, the manipulation, the impulsive decisions, the desperation of needing to gamble, and really took hold of me at that point. And that carried on, say, for about a year. And I tried to put all the gam stops in place and just use demo slots as a way to kind of stop spending all my money and stop taking money that wasn't mine. That worked for a very short period of time before I needed that kind of fix of the dopamine hit, I guess, that I got from actually spending real money. And I started to gamble with other people's names under different accounts and things like that. And yeah, that just was, 7, 8 years of consistent, just living a Groundhog Day of addiction. And it just got incredibly worse. I had another traumatic event happen within our family in 2019, and that changed the dynamics of my family forever. And there was a lot of grief in that cut-off period of my family, and that just caused me to want to escape even more. It was a bit like therapy for me, like an escape of day-to-day life, the reality of this traumatic event that had happened. I didn't have to think about it or feel about it or any of that kind of stuff. And I could just hide in my bubble of addiction. And slowly but surely, it eventually isolated me from everything and everybody around me. I stopped going out on nights out. Or if I did go out on nights out, I was terrible for bringing extension leads because the pub or nightclub plug sockets were so bad that I used to take my own extension lead to these places and unplug their fruit machines, plug them into my extension lead, plug my charger in, because the fear of being separated from my phone overwhelmed me and I couldn't bear the thought of it. My phone dying would put me into severe anxiety and panic attacks because I didn't have my gambling there. And it was absolutely everything to me in those moments, In 2023, it all came to a head. I had some childhood memories come back that really rocked my world. I became even more isolated in that time because I couldn't talk to anybody about these memories because it was a police matter. And I just had no one to kind of turn to. And the only thing that gave me peace was gambling. After stealing off my ex-partner again for the millionth time, I was just so sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was so drained emotionally, physically, mentally drained. And I didn't know that there was help out there at that time. I thought the only option was to end my life, and that was the decision I nearly made. Because of the guilt of, if I died, I would cause trauma to other people, and I didn't want my death to cause other people trauma. And I'd experienced so much trauma of my own. People always ask me, did I think about my daughter and my friends? And I did. But in all honesty, I believed at the time I was doing everyone a favour. I'd become such a nuisance to everyone around me. You know, I was emotionally blackmailing people to get what I needed from them. I was using people. I was selfish. I was manipulative, and I wasn't pleasant to be around. I lost contact with my daughter for 18 months over that period. We wasn't talking at these times, but I decided to ring GamCare's National Helpline at the end of 2023. And then I got trauma therapy from a therapist called Ricia. And then I got gambling therapy through GamCare's National Helpline. And after a few weeks of speaking with them, for the first time in my life, I was just vulnerable, open, and completely honest. Completely honest about my gambling addiction and my behaviours surrounding that. Completely honest about other addictions that I was suffering with at the time. And I just, for the first time in my life, I just told somebody absolutely, if I laid my soul bare, you know. And yeah, that was just that kind of the road to recovery from that point. I went to rehab in April of 2024. And it's just been beautiful since that time.
What I love about your recovery story is the fact that you've had so many different kinds of recovery, because I imagine there was times when you needed the really intense support around the kind of the trauma things, family situation and heartbreak and miscarriage, down to the timeline where you get, you know, you're now in a regular safe fellowship, where you can really grow and see the potential of where your recovery can take you. I read the interview that you did with the BBC this year, which is still online, and I hope it's online for a good while, which was so honest and open about your own gambling behaviour massively increasing the week before your period. Can I ask, at what point did you realise that the pattern was connected between the two, Kiki?
So when I came into another fellowship, me and my friend, we was both in fellowship together, and I was noticing, you know, as women, we become in sync when you're close with somebody. So there was 1 week of the month where we was both really aggy, aggressive, and just not in the mood, and we just wanted to kind of hit that fuck it button. We didn't care. As the months were going on, we started to have more in-depth conversations and realising that we feel this way because we're ovulating. It's our ovulation, we're due on. That's when we kind of came up with this process for me and her of talking to each other and helping each other through the hardest parts of the month, which was that week. Before we came to that realisation, I was kind of wondering, like, why don't I care about my recovery on this particular certain parts of the month? I didn't care. I didn't want to go to meetings. I didn't want to go to groups. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just wanted to lay in bed in a dark room. And I could recognise if I wasn't very careful, I could have relapsed. I realised I was more likely to relapse on those weeks. So then when I came to that realisation, we started supporting each other a lot more in that part of our cycles, which really helped. It was really beneficial. Then I started talking about it in my women's group with Epic Restart Foundations called Women's Empowerment. And then other women in the group speaking about their experiences, and I realised and learned about the connections towards addiction and relapse and lapses with your hormones. And it just makes so much sense. And so that enabled me to then learn my own body, learn my cycle. And I downloaded the Flow app so that I could know when it was coming. Now I'm at a point where I know now I've got, in those weeks, I need to be proactive into my recovery. If I want to sit and eat a mountain of chocolate, I will. If I need to have a lazy day, I will. I just feed what my body needs in those moments and kind of keep my schedule quite clear that week, just attending my groups, getting involved in my support systems, And it's a lot of work, but it has to be done because I know that I'm more vulnerable than ever in that part of my cycle.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like when that light bulb moment comes on where no matter what part of your recovery you're in, it's like you can't unsee it. It's like you're kind of, you realise like your motivations and your hormones and everything's all tied in. And you kind of turn around and go, how did I go all those years without realising it? But I almost think it's like it's part of the lack of self-awareness that we have when we were gambling anyway. It's like you think you're the most self-aware person in the world, you know everything that's going on around you, but actually you're clueless because everyone can see that you are in some sort of funk and trouble, but you're in denial and everything. So part of the denial is understanding your own body. But when that eureka moment goes on, it's like it can sort of galvanise your recovery, in many ways, isn't it? Because I know for certain, like, times, especially early in my recovery, when I was I just wasn't in the right side of it. And it wasn't as if I wanted to run out and gamble. It's just that it just didn't feel as sexy somehow, that way when you're really, really motivated. And there was those little mini phases. And I definitely know that's when I would take more risks, and I would even find a way to justify my risky behaviour, such as because I drank too much, that's the reason why I gambled again, or I'm up to high dough about somebody else's behaviour, so that's gave me reason to gamble again. And I just couldn't separate the wood from the trees, around the hormonal side. So once it clicks in, you can be rocking and rolling with it.
For a lot of women, we've always had our period since early teenagers. But for a lot of women, we didn't get taught anything else. We just knew we came on our period and that was it. And I thought I was the odd one out of learning about my body this late in life as I'm 40.
Yeah.
But I've realised that so many women don't know their bodies or what their cycles mean, and they don't know the behaviours surrounding that. I think it's so important to learn these things because everybody's so different. So it's not one shoe fits all in this manner. But I think that once you do learn it just empowers you a lot because you've got that bit of control around how you handle yourself in those moments. And I think that just makes life easier.
It's a bit like the weather, looking at the forecast and going, that's going to be a really heavy rainy day. I'm going to be prepared to like what I'm wearing, what I'm doing that day, and sort of just having foresight of your own moods. And it's amazing that women can go through 20s, 30s, even into their 40s without that awareness, and the patterns that have been going for a long time. And also when women, that's why it's so important, I think, as well, for women to be in safe spaces to talk about these things. Because the idea of maybe like years ago, me going to GA and going, do you know what? I think I'm on the rag. The guys would have been like that, do you know what I mean? Whereas that'd have made them so uncomfortable that they wouldn't have known what to do.
Exactly, because I talk about this stuff in specifically only women's meetings. Yeah. I don't bring up these subjects because gambling world is very male dominated and recovery in most sectors are heavily male dominated. So I've worked really hard to find the spaces that I'm so comfortable in with the women's groups, and I go to them religiously every week and we can talk about anything, and it's not just about having your period, it's postpartum, menopause, there's so many things that go into it that change who we are as women throughout different stages of our cycles and where we're at. And some of these things are beyond our control. And we're all just trying our very best to manage it in the best way possible, even though sometimes it's like we're drowning because we don't have all the answers, and every month of your period, even though we've had it from 12, 13 years old, it still changes. It's not the same. It evolves throughout the years. So your moods and your behaviours and your patterns will evolve. And that's why I think, but learning about my body, recognising those changes, speaking about those changes, 9 times out of 10, another woman will be like, oh, I've gone through that, or my daughter's gone through that, or my mum, and it makes you feel so validated, so understood, and not like you're losing your brain, like you're losing your head, because sometimes I honestly feel like I'm losing my head with this stuff.
Totally, yeah. And can you share a little bit about how you dealt with the triggers since being in recovery? Like, kind of what strategies do you use, and do you still use them to this day?
I still use a lot of things that I learned in rehab. and that is to pause, just take a breath. Still do a lot of breathing exercises. I write gratitude lists every day. I talk to myself kindly. I make a conscious effort to love myself even more on those days. I also just allow myself to have the feelings I need to feel. I don't avoid them. I don't try and hide from them. Whether they're good or bad, I just allow myself to feel them. And I also speak about it. I go into my groups and I tell them exactly how I'm feeling. Connection for me is the biggest part of my recovery. The connection I have through others, that support that we give one another. It just goes such a long way in making me feel like I can cope. I think that I've learned the times where I really don't want to do anything or I want to isolate, that's the times I know I have to force myself to reach out.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I can spiral. But I do have probably about 2 days a week where I don't have any appointments or anything. I just go on the groups that I like to go on to, and I just have those days to me. I think it's extremely important. I know that people are parents and caregivers and things like that. So some people don't have the luxury of having a whole day, and I understand that. For me, that's a privilege. But a couple of hours, 2 hours in a week that is just yours, whether that's having a bath, going for a walk, meeting a friend, or if it's just laying on the sofa in your PJs with your hair scarfed up, binge watching something, eating a takeaway in peace, do it. It helps us be better versions of ourselves as well when we take that time for ourselves. It's okay to be selfish sometimes, and I don't think enough women hear that, but it's definitely okay to be selfish sometimes.
Definitely, Kiki. And final kind of question, what advice can you share with women that are maybe struggling with their own gambling patterns?
I think what women could do is maybe keep a diary of how they are behaving in that week. You know, if someone's in active addiction, it's good to keep track of, on this week, I was really good. I said I was going to allocate myself £20 for gambling, and I stuck to it. And then they notice that they can stick to it, right? But on certain parts of my circle, I didn't care, and I spent double the amount that I intended. And then once you realise what your own personal pattern is, you can then be aware of that. So maybe you can say, I'm not even going to put the first bet on, because for most of us, once we put that first bet on, there's no going back. But if we can try and avoid in them weeks to not put a bet on, we can use distraction tools, whether that be getting to a box set, making plans with your friends, doing something with the kids, taking up a course, doing some arts and crafts, whatever it may be, other things that you can do with the time that you'd have allocated to gamble. Try and put that into a different direction on those weeks, because that can help save you from making those impulsive decisions that can destroy your world in that moment. I always like to say that through addiction, we can make so many mistakes that we're ashamed of, that would embarrass us, that we wouldn't dare speak of. But regardless of your mistakes that you've made or that you're making, you are worth recovery. You are worth recovery. You are worth a second chance. You are worth happiness. You are worth peace of mind. You are worth a future. And you are loved. You are loved, and you are enough. And that's what I'd like to say to the women out there today, listening.
It's an absolute peach to end on a Tuesday afternoon. I love it. Thank you so much, Kiki, and really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much
Cheers.
for having me.
I'm really grateful to Kiki for all those insights, and I know her openness to share what she experienced will help other women who listen to this episode just help to gain a bit of clarity and advice on this issue. Now, back to that folder that I was talking about earlier, that I was looking for, and it's really helped me make sense of my own journey in relation to menstrual patterns and behaviour in recovery. So from that planner, I've extracted my own data based on 4 months post-rehab. I can't say it's the most scientific-based piece of work that I've ever done, but there are signs that my recovery was in better shape, and I was more determined on days of my menstrual cycle when I wasn't premenstrual, let's put it that way. And that my most self-critical days were during the premenstrual phase, and these were days that I found most challenging to stay in recovery. The days when it felt like the world was against me, and black and white thinking and ego states and so many factors seemed to have got on top of me the most. It's these days that self-care was needed above all else, but it looks from some of these scrolls that they were implemented at the least, let's say. I can see from my notes, irritation of the smallest things were blown out of proportion in hindsight, and bloatedness and brain fog are some of the words that I repeatedly weave into play at this point in my cycle too. It's all there in black and white, and it feeds into a deeper part of my recovery and self-awareness to read it now, almost 4 years down the line. Now, Dr. Rosalind Baker-Frampton, clinical director at Gordon Moody, and who I've met a few times and I know better as Ros, was quoted in the same BBC article as Kiki as saying is that she'd noticed that women were more likely to gamble in a harmful way during hormonal fluctuation. I'm quoting but also slightly paraphrasing. She says, you're more likely to engage in risky behaviours around the time of ovulation, so that's when an egg is released. That's the time when you're most fertile. This includes things like chasing losses, spending more money than they want to spend, staying longer than she'd otherwise decide to stay. They end up spending more money and making more risky choices around gambling and not stopping at other points in their cycle. Now, Gordon Moody has linked up with academics at the University of Birmingham to check out if there is a link between hormonal fluctuations and gambling addiction. The charity, which says the number of UK women that gamble and have addictions is at an all-time high, they've confirmed that the research would take about 4 years. And researchers will also explore whether hormone-regulating medication could help with addiction. And Ros also says, we have a theory that women who are on the pill or are having HRT because their hormones are at a more stable level throughout the month may be less likely to experience these severe gambling cravings. Now, that is really interesting development on the topic. And I'm also partnering with University of East London to explore my own experience and that of other women around the topic. Now, the one thing I've learned is that we've came a long way, and this isn't one of those issues that can be just swept under the carpet or put down to the irrational, emotional women's troubles categories of the day. It's about time we spoke about this as another example of awareness, support and community.
This episode was created by Kat, and you also heard from Kiki.
Before we go, we wanted to recognise that some of the content from today's episode may have resonated with some of you. If any part of the conversation felt a bit too familiar or brought up some difficult feelings, especially around gambling harm, whether it's affecting you directly or someone you care about, please know that you don't have to face this alone. There are free, confidential services out there to help support you. If you feel that you are in a crisis, please contact the National Gambling Helpline on 0808 8020 133 or the Samaritans on 116 123. Both services operate a 24-hour, 7 days a week helpline. You can also find more information and support through the Bet No More website. That's Bet No, as in KNOW, moreuk.org.
Her Upper Hand was the product of a 6-week course by Greater Govanhill Magazine, facilitated by Eve Livingston and Flora Zajicek. The podcast producer was Flora Zajicek. The project was funded by Gamble Aware and published by The Big Light. To find out more, visit the Greater Govanhill website.